I'm getting ready to paint this table. Let me tell you what has transpired this morning, and I'll post this later on here if I can. I prepared this tabletop. I prepped, and I did that live on YouTube, and I'll share that over here later for those who may be interested in it. This is the top to the table that I bought at the garage sale last weekend. I painted the legs black, and it was scratched up in several places, and because of the, it had been outside and the potential for residue, I cleaned it off is what I'm trying to say. I cleaned it, and let me remind you of this. If you see the red live at the top, I'm live right now. If you don't see that, then you're catching me on the replay. Leave any comments below, and I'll come back to them and answer them if I don't see them as we go now. But I used Dixie Belle White Lightning. Here it is. And mixed this in with some warm water to clean it with. This is like a TSP, which is trisodium phosphate, I believe, which is a strong detergent. And it deglosses a little bit. There's definitely no need to sand, and a lot of times if you're using a chalky based paint, or mineral based, which Dixie Belle is, then you don't need to prep in this fashion. But because this is a tabletop surface, for one, it's going to get used a lot, and there would be easy to get scratches and things like that. I want to make sure and go the extra lengths to make sure that it's done right. And it is going to be distressed looking, so I don't have to stress out over a whole lot of that. But anyways, I cleaned it with the Hey Billy, I cleaned it with the Dixie Belle White Lightning TSP based product to sort of degloss it a little bit, to get all of the outdoor residue, old polish and things like that off of it. And then I put a coat of Dixie Belle Boss. I don't know if I still have that sitting around here somewhere, but it's another Dixie Belle product, and the Boss stands for blocks, odors, oh my goodness, blocks, odors, and something. And I had it here a minute ago. Here it is. Blocks, odors, stains, and stops bleed through. And the reason I used that and prepped, even though you don't always have to prep whenever you're using a mineral paint, because it does adhere well to surfaces, was the scratches and things that are on this table. I was afraid there was going to be bleed through, which is whenever you scratch or... And if I had sanded, none of that was necessary, but there were the scratches. That allows old tannins that are under the wood, under the original finish that was on this table, to bleed through. And if I would have just went straight on and painted the red, there's a good chance, because of it being damaged, that it would have bled through and put like a tan or a brown or a yellow or a greasy looking spot underneath my paint, and I would have been mad about that later on, having to redo it. And I hope I'm not still going to be mad at myself, because what I did was put one coat everywhere, and then I went back over the areas where I thought there had been some potential for bleed through, because the original finish was gone, over the scratches and the edges where there was extra wear and tear, and I put a second coat there instead of putting a second coat all over the whole thing, because I'm always in a hurry and I want to get the red on there. Ever since I saw this table, hate red, ever since I saw this table, all I could envision was it being red. So it's fixing to be red. I'm going to shut up and I'm going to paint. And I looked at all the reds this morning, and this looks sort of more like an orange red. I really thought it was a blue red, but it's called Honky Tonk red, and I'm fixing to put it on here. And there's a lot of crevices. I made sure to clean with the White Lightning really good down in these crevices, and I used a small chip brush to dust through them first, because there was some dust and things like that in there. And then I cleaned it with the White Lightning, and I made sure to go deep in there for that. And I'm going to go in these crevices with this red right now too, but I plan on sort of aging it and antiquing it a little bit with either a black glaze or a black paint through those seams. But I'm going to go ahead and let them have their first coat with the red. There's a little bit of a ridge right here, and hopefully you can see. I'm going to do that, this one right here. I'm going to do that in the red as well. But up under here, there's another probably 4.5 inches of ledge. That's what the legs themselves connect to. Hey Teresa, the legs themselves connect to, and I'm going to paint that black to match the legs. So hopefully it'll all tie in together. And this is a new brush, so now and then there may be a brush here to come out, but this is one of the new, it's called the Dixie Belle Mini. It's what do you call it, an artificial hair brush or whatever. Not a hairbrush, but it's not made with bristles, you know, out of an animal or whatever. It's man-made materials that they're made out of, and it's supposed to give a really good smooth finish. And whenever you're working on a tabletop, I believe a really smooth finish is important. So I'm going to try to get this on here without a tremendous amount of going back and forth over it. But as the paint is so thick, as I do go over it, I'm going to go back and forth like this to make sure that I do get it everywhere. But I'm then at the end, and I'll show you that in just a minute, I'll come back through and make sure that it's one long continuous stroke from one end to the other on my final finish. This will, I'm estimating, get 2 coats of the red, and then I'll put a coat of whatever top coat that I'm going to use. I'll probably go the first time with just the regular like a matte top coat, and then before I start with my black glaze and wax, but then I'm going to put Gator Hide is the name of Dixie Belle's water resistant toughest top coat. So I'm going to put probably 2 or 3 coats of the Gator Hide on here after I get the after I get everything else on here. I'll do that. Wax is always your last step, so if I'm using wax to get my black on here rather than glaze, I'll do my coats of Gator Hide first, and then see if I can turn around just a little bit because I'm fixing to get on my knees here. Hey Donna, then I'll come back and do the black wax last. So I don't know, I feel like I want a little more black in those crevices than I will get with just the black wax, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So I will definitely, you know, do another live as I'm doing that, so you can see the difference of how that goes. In case you're wanting to do a similar project, then you can see whether you like doing it whichever way that I choose, or whether you want to do it the other way. But I think, you know, now that I think about it, I think the black wax is going to be the way to go. And when you use mineral-based paint like this, you also have to remember what that top coat, or the Gator Hide in this instance, is going to do is provide a protective top surface above the paint, but the paint itself is going to continue to cure and harden over about a 30-day period. So after 30 days, it'll, you know, the undersurface of the paint will be good too. So if you do paint something like this, and you're planning on, say, using this table for Thanksgiving, well, you better get, you don't want to put a big old hot platter of turkey on top of something that you painted within the, you know, within the last 30 days, because there is the potential of scratching that surface. So if you're going to say be doing a project for Christmas dinner, there's still time. But using the Gator Hide on top of the painted surface is going to give it another level of protection that's going to allow it to have some use. It's not like you got to just sit there and look at it and you can't sit anything on it during those, is that a lump? It is. It's not like you can't put anything on it during that first 30 days, but you don't want to be scraping things back and forth and, you know, otherwise being rough on the surface and putting, you know, a 30-pound turkey on it during that first 30 days. just to be safe, because it would be sad to, you know, go to all that work to make something that you feel like is beautiful and then have it get ruined the first time you use it. So respecting that cure time is important. But you could, you know, eat at it if you were not going to be all rough and tough about your eating, that kind of thing. Only you know whether your family slings their plates across the table, I reckon. I don't know. When it comes to a big old dinner, we like to eat at my house. I just feel like whenever you're, you know, I'm bringing new life back to a table that would have been thrown away. No, I don't believe that, you know, or maybe I've been poor enough in my life where I would have been proud to have had this table just the way it was, because a table's better than no table. But re-love it, you know, reminding it that it's loved and give it a new life, and making it something that somebody's going to love and appreciate that. Once again, that is sort of what makes it all worthwhile. And you know, get to take pride in that when you're doing it for yourself and your home too. My grandmother used to paint the floors and the furniture and everything at her house. She was very creative, and she would get, you know, kind of tired of things sort of the way that I do, and just find a way to make them new and repurposed and loved again. And I'm so glad I had that in my life, and I hope that my grandkids get that from me. I know Jules already painting everything in her room, my 10-year-old granddaughter. And Jessalyn likes to paint too. She's 3, but I don't think Candy's let her get after the furniture yet. I like these tiny little brushes. When I come back around there, I'll show you how little this is. But for my particular hands, and I broke this wrist, I've got a steel plate and 9 pins in there. And it hurts to, you know, to overuse it and use it a whole lot. And these little brushes fit my hand so good. So if you've got a, I guess I have a typical size hand. I never compared it to anybody else's hand. But if you've got a, you know, it's not a man hand. If you got just a regular woman-sized hand, these smaller brushes cause less stress on your joints. A lot of my colleagues who paint furniture and things like that too would use a spray rig on this. We kind of discussed that in one of my groups yesterday, and they're like, well, I'm teaching a painting one-on-one course, but I really just want to spray this dresser, and that's not 101. But I enjoy the going back and forth of the brush. I mean, you know, of course, I'm jealous of everybody who has a spray rig. My husband has one. If I wanted to use one, I'm sure I could. But I love the texture that the brush strokes leave. A little bit of brush strokes, not too heavy. But I love the satisfaction of painting it. You know what I mean? Part of it is not just the love. I'm going to try to move this around. Part of it's not just the love that you give to the piece by giving it new life, but part of it is the therapeutic, the therapeutic value of just sitting here and mindlessly going back and forth and getting to enjoy the process. That's the part that I love the most. Whenever I know I'm going to get to come to work and paint for the day, I'm excited to get out of bed and get here. I enjoy it so much. And that's a good thing. I don't know that my arms are long enough for all of this. Can y'all? There we go. And I have no idea what possessed me to think this table needed to be red, but the minute I saw it, it was this tabletop part was in the back of my friend Sue's pickup truck when I stopped by her garage sale just to say hi. This part was upside down in her truck. The legs were like laying over there in another part, and the leaf that I'm not using, the leaf that I'm not using was in another area, and I was looking at the leaf trying to figure out, oh, can I make some kind of sign on that? What's that? And she said, oh, that's the leaf to this table over here. And then I saw the table. I didn't inspect it as close as I should have, but I got it for a very good price, $20. It's a pretty good price to have something this big to play with. So I couldn't leave it there, and I could just see it being red. I could just see it being red. So I usually trust my intuition, and as soon as I'm done with this, somebody's going to come in here and say, oh my gosh, I've wanted a red table my whole life. My mama used to have one. Or something like that. There's always a reason for it. I believe you just need to trust your creative energy and go with it. Can you probably not see that? Let me see if I can tilt this up a little bit without making you dizzy. Yep, that'll show it a little bit more. There we go. I'm trying to stay within each of the little panels and do one at a time so that I can keep up with where I'm going and not be back and forth too awful much. And this Honky Tonk red is perfect for the color that I was wanting to use. This table almost looks gray right now, but it's not. That's the lighter streaks that you see over it that's making it look more worn like that, or is just the little bit of visibility of the boss that you can still see on it. Dixie Belle is really easy to use. If this surface had not been all scratched up, I wouldn't have used the boss. I would have just painted straight under it and not worried one bit about having an issue with it later on. But it is really thick too. So you have to re-dip a little more often. Oh, I remember I said I was going to show you that brush. See, next to my hand, it holds a lot of paint because of the amount of thickness of the bristles, but the brush itself's not that big. So see where I'm holding it at here, I mean, it weighs nothing, and it's got a good pivot point. And this is called the Mini, the Dixie Belle Mini, and I thought there was a sticker on it. I don't know how much they are, but probably around $20. But that's the thing with good brushes, is you take care of them and you use them for years and years. The other day when I was working on some of those the cheaper brushes, the chip brushes, my husband's like, you know, people just throw them brushes, your paint brushes away. And I'm like, dude. And I'm thinking, if he had any idea how much I pay for paintbrushes, he would not want me to throw nothing away. Whenever you respect and you love it and you have a good brush, you wash it when you're done, and you take good, and you dry it, and you take good care of it, and you respect it, and it does a good job for you, and you take care of it. The people who do this all the time want a good brush because you want to get good coverage, and you don't want real heavy brush marks, and you don't want something that's going to weigh down your wrist and hurt your wrist when you're trying to paint. So having a good, like this doesn't weigh anything. Having a good brush is very important. And I don't know if everybody else is like me, but when I pay $20 or $30 for something like this, I'm going to take care of it. But you could, if you're not planning on painting a whole bunch of pieces and not painting all the time, you could do this with a good chip brush. And if you wanted to, you could throw it away. I mean, if you watch me very often, you'll know I do use chip brushes from time to time, and mostly that's whenever I'm worried if I'm going to be too tired at the end of the day to want to take good care of my brushes, or if I forgot my good brushes at home. which was the instance today. So these are new ones I just opened for myself, and I'm in love with it. I'm so glad that I did. But I like to use, here at work, a lot of times I just use the dishwashing liquid if I have to. But we have something called Scrubby soap, I think it's what it's called. Dixie Belle makes it, and I think I got it in orange. It comes in like lemon, orange, and something else. But anyways, it's like a bar of soap, but it's got almost like those mesh bags that your produce comes in sometimes, that has that little bit of a texture to it. So when you're rubbing, you wet the bar of soap in your hand, and you run this under the faucet, and you scrub back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on there, and it cleans up all in those bristles. And that's, you know, a really, really good, easy way to get them clean too. And depending on, I'll tell you another tip. Here at work, we have what we call in the South City water and city sewer. I don't know if that's what it's called everywhere else, or if it's just called water and sewer, but here it's a kind of a rural area, and a lot of people have septic systems. And if you have a septic tank at home and you don't have a large, you know, municipal water treatment plant type of thing, then you don't want paint, even good, this kind of paint, even safe paint, you don't want it filling up your septic tank. You don't want to have problems with that later on. So, and at my house, I have a septic system. There's city water there, but there's not city sewer there. And we have what's called as a mechanical system. And they're not cheap, and you don't want them messed up. But anyway, so what I do is I have a 5-gallon bucket, and I think I got it at Northern Tool, but you know, any old 5-gallon bucket will do. And I keep it beside my painting table, and all of my paint water from rinsing out my brushes and from, you know, where I wet my brushes during my painting process and all that, I dump that water in that 5-gallon bucket at the end of my painting process, and I rinse out my brushes really good in the water and dump that water in there, and it evaporates. It doesn't like just sit in there wet. If you're thinking, oh, that would be nasty, a bunch of, you know, water building up in there. Well, depending on how much you're painting, it can look nasty for a little while sometimes. But trying to get in this groove real good. But I dump that in there, and it's usually not very much water at a time, and it evaporates as it, you know, just sits there over time. You could take it outside and dump it if you wanted, and if I had like the size of bucket of water, I'll show you that in a minute, that I use here, I would just go outside and dump that and wash my brush in that again, and just dump that if I was downstairs. But my studio's upstairs at home, and I'm lazy, so I have that 5-gallon bucket. And it evaporates, and you can peel out this whole big old bottom acrylic piece of where the paint dries in there, out of the bottom there, if you wanted to clean your bucket. But it will probably take the whole rest of my life. If I was to do that every single day, I would never fill that bucket up with acrylic paint from the leftover residue from my brush cleaning. So don't clean your brushes and wash that down the sink if you have a septic system. That's my public service announcement for the day. And I know that not because I'm particularly smart on that kind of stuff, but I'm married to a contractor, and if I hear my husband say one more time, "You're not pouring that paint water down that drain, are you?" I'll probably scream. But I do have an answer. "Well, no, I'm not pouring that water down the drain. I done told you that. I got that 5-gallon bucket in there." Or, "Didn't you just see me go outside and dump that? Of course I'm not going to dump that down the drain. I'm smarter than that." Always got to have a good answer, right? never ever let them know that, yeah, probably a couple of years ago I was pouring it down the drain. And once I heard him say it and I denied it the first time, I went and got me that bucket. So this table is going to be semi the farmhouse style because of these ridges and things that are in here, but it's not going to be black, white, or gray, but it's still going to lean more toward a farmhouse style than anything else. So the aging and the making it look time worn and all the other things that I'm going to do as I add the black paint in later are all going to be done thinking about being in the farmhouse style. So this is going to be a little bit of an eclectic farmhouse. I appreciate y'all if you can give me a share or give me a heart or leave comments and things like that, because all those things give us higher reach on Facebook, and then more people get to see the videos, and then it's a little more worth our while. Now let's see if I can squeeze in here. I don't know if you can see how small this area is, but I'm feeling thin right now because I've been in. But you see how I'm doing if you weren't on here in the beginning, even though I'm going back and forth a lot, which is not something you would, you know, that you want to make a habit of. This paint is thick. The Dixie Belle paint is thick, and I'm wanting to make sure that I get good even coverage all throughout. But when I get from one end to the other, let me get this one done real quick and I'll show you. When I get from, like I'm done with this whole little section right here, I'm going to take my brush and before it starts getting tacky and go from one end to the other to make sure that there's a straight line with my brush strokes. Like here, with me just going this way and that way, that's going to leave crappy looking brush strokes that are just crazy, and I'm going to have to deal with that later and probably put more coats than I need to, trying to cover up the mistake. But I still paint in that fashion because that works well for me. It doesn't hurt my wrist and it does good. But I make sure every time to go back up to the top and down to the bottom and make sure that the final set of brush strokes are straight, because it just gives more of a professional finish. But if you wait too long until it's dried too much, then you're going to have some drag, and it's going to want to lift some of that off the other end. Let's see if I can turn this around. Lift some of that off of it and not be what you want. I'm choosing just to do this top ledge in the red, and then I'm going to do that underneath it. Ledge in the black, but I'll probably finish every bit of this red first, all couple of coats of it, let that dry, and then flip it over and get that from the other side, because in this particular table, I don't know if you can see that, but my hand is under there that deep, so there's that much of that I'd have to be down on my hands and knees trying to figure out how to do. So since it doesn't have the legs on it right now, and I have it up on this surface, once I get all the red on it, it won't be today, it'll be next week, because I'm off on Friday and Saturday, and we're closed on Sunday. We come up here and work every Sunday, but I don't do any videos or anything on Sundays up here, from up here. This is some of the areas where there was a little extra wear from being used, and that's the areas where I put the went ahead and went with it, the extra coat of the Boss primer to make sure that, you know, because it definitely exposed some of the underfinish, and it's more likely in that spot to have a bleed through. I'm switching direction on this piece. If you can see, it has a ridge here, and it has sort of like it's framed out all the way around with all of the inner pieces going that way. Well, I'm on these two side pieces here. You know, instead of just going like this with it, I'm going to switch directions and sort of follow what would be the grain of the wood if this was a real solid wood piece. This is probably something like Broyhill or Ashley, which are, you know, known to be, you know, higher quality furniture pieces, but they're not made out of solid wood. It looks like solid wood, and sometimes they will lead you to believe it's solid wood, but as a, you know, being married to a woodworker, they're not wood. This is a little bit of veneer on top of some press board. And veneer is, if you don't know, I mean, you may know, but veneer is very, very, very almost paper thin pieces of real wood that they've like shaved off like you would a piece of Parmesan cheese to make a curl out of it, that they've shaved that thin, and then they put something similar to Mod Podge, wood glue, on the press board where they grind up all the wood, and it actually is stronger than real wood and less likely to warp and things like that, but it's not solid wood, and it's very heavy. But anyway, they take that press board and they make an MDF, which is a medium density fiberboard, is what that's called. And it's very heavy, and it is made out of wood, but it's like they mix up a bunch of sawdust with a whole bunch of wood glue, and then they mash it up like they're making a meatball, and then they run it through like a dough pressing machine, if you were thinking about cooking, and they run it through something like that that's going to shoot it out the other end to be in the, you know, shaped like a piece of plywood. It's usually going to be a 4x8 sheet. And then that then is, you know, cut down after it, you know, solidifies. Then it's stronger than a piece of wood because it's not going to have the fibers and the layers of what would have been in real wood. And so it is going to be stronger, but they take that and cut it into the piece of furniture, or either they laminate the oh my gosh, now I'm having brain freeze, or brain fart is what I was going to say. So there, I said fart. They take the, whatever I was talking about a minute ago, the real thin piece of wood, and glue it to the top of there, and they actually would use like an iron, but not like a hand iron, like a press iron, and use heat to then laminate and make it become a part of. It's not supposed to come off, but veneer, that's what it's called, veneer. And but sometimes veneer does peel. But anyway, that then makes this look like, say, a solid piece of cherry wood, which would be very expensive. Cherry trees don't get that big. They're a little more rare than, say, a pine tree, but it's a hardwood. It's a beautiful wood. Some has, you know, more beautiful grain to it than others. And if you find one that has a beautiful grain and you're able to slice it paper thin and get, you know, enough out of it to do 500 tables instead of 3 tables, then, you know, that's pretty successful if you're in the furniture making business. And so they put that on there, and it's called bookending, to where they can slice, you know, out of a board that's that thick, they could probably get 1,000 pieces of that to go on there, and then they can match up to each other, what's called bookends. So if you had this piece beside that piece, they came off, all of these would have came off of that same original board, so they'll all have the same figure to it and the same design to it, and you bookend that up and it makes a beautiful figure, and it looks like a very, very expensive piece of furniture, when really it's just fake wood mixed with wood glue, or not fake wood, but sawdust mixed with wood glue, hardened, and then the pretty piece Very, very thin, pretty piece. I mean, like, waist, I don't even know, skinnier than a 64th of an inch or something. On the top, which makes it be that's how they do the inlays and things, where you're thinking, oh my goodness, here's this most beautiful piece of furniture. And they've been doing this 100 years. This isn't something that new manufacturers do. Hi, Mary Lou. But they that, like I said, can peel off, you know, over time with exposure to heat or moisture and things like that. But they, you know, there's only so many trees to go around. Okay, so there you go. I think the whole thing is done around in the red. That's the first coat. I have a fan right here behind me. I'm going to put that on here. This used about more than a third and less than a half of the sample size of the Honky Tonk red, so I will probably use, you know, more than 2/3 of it to as I go back and put another coat on here. But I'm going to put a fan on this so that it'll hurry up and dry, so that I can get another coat of the red on here before the end of my work day today, so that whenever I come back in next time that I get to work on it, I can go ahead and flip it over and get the black on this under edge, and then flip it back over and start putting my top coat on it, and the and figuring out how, whether I'm going to use wax or a glaze to go in all these crevices to put the black in, to sort of age it and make it look a little more time worn. So let me see if I can turn this around to where you can see. We definitely have a red table going on there. And some of this is areas where the paint got on thicker and thinner, but most of that is the fact that this area is already dry and that area is not. So it won't be as splotchy once that it dries all the way. And once I get the second coat on there, you're not much going to be able to, you know, see any kind of splotchiness. If you do, I'll put a third coat on there, because even though it was an inexpensive table to begin with, I want to do a good job. And if you have a project you're working on, if you've painted a table or something like that before, I would love for you to share it with us and for us to get to see your work too. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you're interested in any more info on the Dixie Belle products, I'll put my link down in the comments, and whenever y'all follow that link to go get the more info, I get credit for that, so that's a cool thing too. And it, you know, allows me to justify how much money I spend on paint and supplies, and taking the time out of my work day to be able to share with y'all. So I appreciate you, thank you, and I hope to see your projects and see you again soon. I'll come back when we're putting the black stuff on. Bye.